Well, the first time I ever met Randy Rhoads was I was staying at the Le Parc Hotel in West Knoll, just off Santa Monica, and I'd just left Sabbath. And a guy called Dan the Strum said he'd got this guitar player. I thought he was just. He looked very young, as I recall. But then when I heard him play, I couldn't believe a guy could play so well, you know. I heard him play, and I was just knocked back how remarkable he was. And I don't know, I think I asked him if he wanted to come to England, and he came to England and he lived with me for a while. I was all messed up at the time because of just getting fired from Sabbath, and I thought my career was over.
When you first met him, was it like a breath of fresh air?
No. To be honest with you, when I first met Randy Rhoads, it wasn't much of a breath of fresh air. I thought it would bide my time because I was in a state of shock after leaving Black Sabbath, and I thought after leaving Black Sabbath my career was over. So I kind of strung along with him for a while, not thinking anything would really ever come out of it. But then when he came to England, I got a guitar player, which was a start. And I think I was signed to Jet Records, and then my wife, my now wife, then was my manager. She got involved, and we found Bob Daisley, and we found Lee Kerslake. And he lived with me for a while in my house in Stafford, and we started writing bits and pieces of songs, and before too long we got enough for a couple of albums, you know. And
the first time that, when was the first moment you realised I have a special partner here, not just a guitar player, I have someone who's special?
Well, it's been such a long time ago, and it's only after the fact that you realise that you had someone special, because it's like the old saying goes, you never know what you've had until it's gone. In fact, it was only, as the years have gone by since Randy's demise, I have reflected on those times, and it seems that we were together for such a long time, but yet such a short time at the same time, you know. It seems that my period of time with Randy Rhoads was longer than my time in Black Sabbath. And my period of time after Randy Rhoads wasn't as long as the time I was with Randy Rhoads, because it was such an influential part of my career, and in so many ways more than just being a guitar player, as a person, as a human being, as a guy, you know, as a dear friend, and both not only with myself but my wife as well. He was a friend of the family. I mean, of course, we never had the children when he was around, and I often wondered what he would thought about children and things, you know. I mean, and I got my daughter's now 13 years of age, and she wasn't born when Randy died, and he's been dead now, I think 15 years this year. And it seems to have gone by like a flash, you know. But there's still parts of the time that I can remember with Randy Rhoads as if it happened yesterday, you know. Things.
Yeah, go on, give us a couple of those.
Like, for instance, he came to me one day and he said, I want a white Marshall stack. I said, I don't make one. He said, well, I want one. And he was one of these guys that if he wanted something, he would move mountains. He'd drive you mad until he got what he wanted, you know. I said, well, Marshall don't make a white stack. He said, well, I want one. I asked him if he can make me one. And I said, well, I'll try. And I found him up and I said, look, I'm Ozzy Osbourne. Can you do a white stack? He said, I don't care if you're the King of England, we don't. No, I said, well, Randy, they don't. He said, well, tell him I want one. He said, well, once one. He says, not that turn. I said, can't have one, you know. So I went up to Leicester, I think it was, where Marshall was, and I said, you know, or Randy did. I can't really remember whether he went or I went. Anyway, it ended that he got a white Marshall stack, and if you look on the old photographs, you'll see like a white Marshall stack alongside a regular stack, you know. And he had this pedal board that used to drive us all insane with it. I mean, he was the only one on this planet, him and the guy that made it, that knew how to work it. So when you'd be on the road and you'd be playing an ice rink or something, or near a radio station, you'd get like radios and all these funny noises, and he would get really upset if his sound was altered. And it was really whereas most guitar players use the guitar as an extension of their ego, Randy didn't do that. Randy I think he used his guitar as an extension of his personality.
How would you describe his personality? I mean, obviously, so many people.
Randy Rhoads as a person, as a regular guy. He was a regular guy, you know. He was a caring, loving, funny, goofy, clowning, loving person. He had his moments, so did we all, you know. I mean, he wasn't any different than anybody else, but the fact of the matter is that he was a dedicated musician. I remember every day off he'd go in the Yellow Page and get a classical guitar teacher to come into the hotel room and give him a lesson. I said, well, why don't you just have a day off? We've been burning our bridges at both ends for the last 2.5 years. Just have a day off. He said, no, I really want, I like this. This is where I get bored having a day off. So he bought himself a classical guitar. And he started to write his own nodes, or I can't remember what they're called, sort of like his own works or whatever. Which incidentally, his mother Dolores couldn't decipher them after his death. You know, I mean, he'd written his own thing, and he said to me on that journey, he says, "You know what? He said, I've had enough of this now." I said, "What?" Because we got Blizzard of Oz and Diary of a Madman flying up the charts, started doing great business again. And he wants to quit. And I said, well, what do you want to quit for? He says, I want to go to UCLA and get a degree in classical guitar playing. I said, don't make sense to me. I said, what do you want to do that for? I said, because why don't you make a ton of dough? When you got the money, you can do whatever you like. He says, I'm not interested. And he wasn't that way. He wasn't that kind of a guy. That's the difference between him and I are. He wasn't interested. Well, not saying I'm in it for the money period. But he didn't look at it as one option of a career. He thought that I'm a guitar player. That I don't want to just be known as a rock player. I want to achieve another angle on my instruments. And we wanted to get a doctor of philosophy or whatever, a doctorship on classical guitar playing, and he wanted to write classical works more. If you listen to, like, for instance, the song "Diary of a Madman," the beginning of that, I stole from one of his guitar lessons where he was going through the scales, and I said, you should put an extra note on that and make that into a song. If you like the beginning, dun 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 dun. That was a lesson that he was having when we lived together in an apartment. I was coming around on the couch. I says, "That's good, Randy." And he says, "What?" I said, "Add another note on the end, dun dun." And he went, "It's stupid." I said, "Well, just play it again and just overturn it." And I suppose the combination with Bob Daisy and myself and him was quite interesting for the time that it was together, although Bob never works out because of certain personal problems.
When it comes to, I mean, did you find, or have you found in retrospect, he is someone who, not to talk about anyone else that has managed to translate your thoughts?
No, the one thing I will forever be indebted to Randy Rhoads for was the fact that all I was before I met Randy Rhoads was just singing with a rock and roll band who had a lot of ideas. Now, when I was with Black Sabbath, I had a lot of musical ideas that I couldn't relate because I can't play an instrument. So you feel like a bit of a bozo when you go, well, I've got this really incredible idea which is flying around my head, and they say, well, how does it go? And you start whistling it or humming it or whatever, and they go, well, that's boring. Whereas Randy would say, well, oh yeah, I know that note. What about if you played it in this note? And he would work with me rather than say, oh, I ain't got time. And then the frustration before I was going, I said, oh, I want to go do a solo album. Because I was getting, with Sabbath, I was getting musically frustrated. Not saying that the Sabbath music was wrong or anything, which I just felt that musically I wanted to do something what I wanted to be more in control of, you know. That was more what I wanted. Not saying I wanted to be the bee's knees. And they turned around and said, well, you're in a band called Black Sabbath. If you got anything to offer, you should put it to the band. It's all for one and one for all. And I said, well, what about this? And I said, no, we don't like it. What about this? We don't like it. What about this? We don't like it. I goes, well, what if I do a solo album? And then the same old question. If you've got anything to offer, you should put it to the band. So here I was with like a one-legged man in an ass-kicking contest. I wasn't getting nowhere fast. So when I met Randy Rhoads, the one thing I will forever be indebted for was the fact that he sat me down and he worked out my ideas with his ideas, and we compromised. Rather than work against or for each other, we compromised with each other in every possible way. We made the songs work so that we would all like them, including everybody had a fair saying what they liked and what they didn't like. And the best idea won, you know.
Do you think with...
I mean, and also, Randy was a guy that if he wasn't... I remember the solo for Diary of a Madman, he was pissed off. He was really angry that he couldn't find one. He says, I'm going in the studio. Don't knock the door. I'll let you know when I'm ready to. And he spent 3 days and 3 nights in the studio, and he came out and he was like, I think I've got it now. When I heard that solo in the studio, I was literally my ears were pinned back. I'll never forget that.
Do you think? I mean, do you ever look at the moment that he had his? I mean, fate. How much did fate? You told me what he said the night before.
Well, it's a very a lot. I mean, since his death, I've never forgotten his death. Every year I send him flowers and Rachel flowers, and because he wasn't the only one to die that day. Sharon's very dear friend Rachel, she'd worked with Sharon for years, black woman, and. Since the event, a lot of crazy things. It was all meant to be. It was all not meant to be. It was like a murder and all kinds of. I've thought of weird things. I mean, because you think such a fantastic thing happens, such an incredible thing happens. You think of every which way and scenario possible because you go crazy for a while because you can't accept. I mean, I'm talking to you now. In 1 second, it's amazing. It's amazing in 1 second. It's amazing in 1 second how your whole life can turn around. You know. I mean, for it's such a wild way that it kind of throws you off the planet. You know. And that's kind of what. And so for years after, I was thinking, I wonder why. I mean, I know I'd have been awake. I know I'd have been on the plane. I know and I was all this. Why wasn't? I mean, I remember Randy would say to me, "Ozzy, why do you drink so much? Why do you take so much dope? Why do you get stoned all the time?" He never drank much. He never took drugs at all. He never smoked a joint. He smoked cigarettes, but that's about it. He had the occasional drink, but I was drunk and stoned all the time. And he would say to me, "You know, Ozzy, you're going to die soon."
Which must have been.
And when him saying that, and then he goes and dies, and he lives a relatively clean life compared to me. And me at the age of 48, and I think he would be about late 30s now if he was still alive.
Do you ever sit? I mean, are these things you'd sit and wonder what material you would have come out with now, or is it just not?
Well, before he died, I distinctly remember we played at Knoxville, Tennessee, and he was just working on this new idea, and it was so revolutionary. But we never recorded any. It was just on the threshold of coming out with this new dimension, which I know for a fact because I go by my feelings. I go by my hairs on my arms, and my hairs on my arms stand up. Like when you got the solo for I Don't Know, my hairs on my arms stood up. You know, when anybody can do that to me throughout my career, that's a God-given gift. And so when that does that to me, I think I'm like the conductor that can go, yeah, that's good. That makes me feel funny inside. So I'm passing it on, you know. And Randy was doing that every day at sound check, and he was doing that every single day. It wasn't like a guitar solo. It wasn't like a guitar. It was like this new revolutionary idea, which I'm damned if I know what it was about. It was just go on stage and mess around with it. It was more like a sound effects kind of thing. But I don't know. It's hard to explain because I'm not a musician. But I was thinking, God, the next album's going to be so amazing.
How hard was it to do Bark at the Moon after that?
Well, after that was the hard. Well, for the first year or so, I was just going on automatic pilot. Sharon and I were both just. I mean, Sharon and I were in shock for a long time, you know. And when people are in shock, you can't really define. People think of shock or like an electric shock or shock of. It's like you have the shock of it happening. And I remember when it happened, and I was there, and I was thinking, is this really happening? You'd know it to say that. It's a lie. You don't think it's happening. You don't think it's not happening. You can't understand what's happening. You just kind of like, you know, like locked in a time lock, and it's like horrible, and you can't get out. Every time you turn around, there's something worse happening. You know, I mean, it's like being in a battlefield. You know.
It seemed to me.
It's even worse than being in a battlefield, to be honest, because if you go into a battlefield, you know certain people are not going to come out. Whereas if you suddenly wake up and you're in a battlefield, first of all you think, well, how the hell did we get here? And how do you get out, you know? That's the difference. If you walk across a minefield and then your body gets blown up, you expect, oh, well, you know, I don't copy. But if suddenly you go to bed on a bus driving down a freeway, And you wake up and you're in the middle of a field and there's a house on fire and there's bits of aeroplane everywhere and people like running around screaming. It's horrendous.
That was a point.
It's a reoccurring dream, and it still comes to me. Now I wake up some nights in a cold sweat with it, and I don't never want to be there again,
I was going to say, I mean, for the amount of years that I've known you, you've always, I mean, it has come up. It seems to come up an awful lot.
There's not a day goes. There's not a day goes by. There's not one day go by that I don't think of him or speak of him. No, I mean, my wife and I look at certain photographs and there's certain times and there's certain things that we all did, because Sharon and I and Ron used to hang around together and go get... And there's a lot of things that we did in that short time, I mean, I know he had another band, Quiet Right, but what he ever spoke to me about Quiet Right wasn't very favourable. I know for a fact he was never happy with his stuff either. He was never happy with. He was always trying to achieve the impossible.
So I mean, some of the things that you used to do.
Yeah, well, I used to like it when he used to be. I remember just before he died, he'd had a tooth pulled in. I don't know, Phoenix, Arizona, and he was in such a state we had to take him. I cancelled to him and take him home. He was in this guy said, "Oh, this won't hurt a while." He came out, and before we got back to the hotel, we must have shoved 4 boxes of Kleenex in his mouth, and he was in a terrible state. Me and his mother took care of him for a while. I mean, the hardest thing of all, the real hardest thing of all, for me was to face his mother and his family, because I felt somewhat responsible and guilty at the fact that if I hadn't taken this, I mean, if I look at my son now, my baby Jack, and he was Mrs. Rhoads' baby. If someone was to take my son away from me, some foreigner, and all these crazy things go through your head, you think, it's only when you have children yourself that you can understand. If someone were to take your child away and he would never come back, but he'd be in a box. And I mean, I felt really awful for a long time. I had to put on a brave face, and I went kind of crazy. And it was for about 3 or 4 years.
You've been very close to her, though. I mean, you've always been in touch.
I've always maintained the best relationship I can, because I've got nothing to hide in, and through all of us brazing through it. And the support that we've given each other, because Mrs. Rhoads is a very wonderful lady in the respect that I don't think I could honestly sit down to you now and say I'd be sane if my son was to go if my son was to die, and if my son was to die in such a horrendous. If a piece of paper came through my door tomorrow and said my son's got to fight to war, I'd be pissed off. But if he went and he came back and dead, but that would be one thing. But if my son went out in a car and he got killed in a plane wreck, and he was with Ozzy Osbourne, I mean, at that time you got to remember that I was like the Antichrist of the planet, But I mean, that's just one angle. I mean, there was a lot of angles that went through my mind, and you go through why him, not me. We go through I'm older than him, why, and I'm glad it wasn't me, and I'm glad and for a while you feel guilty for being alive. You feel terribly guilty, and I remember that first Christmas Eve, the following year, I just broke down. I couldn't control myself. I was it was an awful time, because I thought, well, Randy ain't here to do it, And there's things, the smell. Every time I smell gardenias, because that was Randy's. That's why I always send gardenias to his grave. He loved them. He loved the smell of gardenias. He just loved the smell of gardenias. He would really go crazy if he saw a gardenia and sit there and smell the flower all day. He loved the smell of gardenias.
When you think of some of the funnier and lighter moments,
I remember one time we were in Canada, and this guy was playing classical guitar. We were in a bar as usual, and he said to the guy, he says, "Do you mind if I play classical guitar with you?" And the guy says, "No, by all means." So he goes upstairs, gets his little pig nose amp, comes down with his Les Paul, puts his Les Paul, sits down in the cross legs and starts playing all this classical stuff. And this guy's like really impressed, But then Randy gets goofy and he starts putting all the shapes in, all the wild shapes with his classical guitar. We were laughing our butts off, man. It was so funny.
It's interesting. I mean, for you at that time, you
But
must
we
have
were-
really had a deep connection, because if you were drinking a lot and he never used to drink that much, that's a deep
But
connection.
I remember when his mother came to England. We were living in this apartment, and this is very funny. This is, I was grossly overweight. She'd never seen me before. And I was unconscious on the couch in this apartment that we'd rented in London, me and Randy. There's all these cans of empty beer and that lying on the floor, and cigarette butts and whatnot. And I wake up and I can hear somebody sweeping the apartment up, and I go, "What the hell's going on?" So he says, and I didn't realise it. I said, "Who's this woman cleaning?" And he goes, "It's my mum." He goes, "Hey, it's my mum." "Oh, I'm sorry." So we go to rehearsals, and I'm sitting in the middle, and Mrs. Rhoads is sitting to my left, and Randy's sitting to my right. So his mum has not spoke to me, because I've just come around on the couch, and she goes to Randy. I'm in the middle of them, and she goes, "So Randy, when do I get to meet Ozzy?" And he goes, "Ma, you're sitting next to him." And she goes, "I thought he was a roadie." He went, "Oh my God."
So you each thought each other was someone. Oh, it's good that. Yeah.
Mm.
Does she? Do you ever? I mean, does she remember that story?
I don't know whether she does. She might.
All these years, you don't mention that one to her again. Well, this might be the first time she hears that one again.
But I do miss you, and every time I play those songs, or even, for instance, just the other night we were playing some of the songs down at the studio, and he was. Whenever I listen to an old record of mine, it takes me back to that time. And it's a kind of the records after that, up until No More Tears, were. No More Tears was a record that I had to do, but it took me a couple of albums to get to let go of the Randy part.
Right. So really, that was the first time that you felt that you finally managed to let go artistically.
Oh yeah. I mean,
so from 1983 or 82, even on through to 1991, where you still music.
It takes a long time for you to. It shakes you like nothing on earth, but you go on. And when Randy died, I just remember saying to Sharon, "It's over." She said, "No, it is not." I says, "But you're joking. Everything that I seem to touch dies or falls to pieces, you know." And she says, we got guys who come and stand in for a while, and we just. And the next thing I remember was doing Madison Square Garden with this guy that I don't even remember the gig. I don't remember, but apparently it was all right. But you kind of go on automatic pilot for a while, you know. And I can't remember Sharon through that pilot period. I can't remember what she was doing, whether she was handling it or what. But I just span off on an alcoholic drug binge for a long while.
So as we sit now, we'll tie it off. As you sit now, just a brief encapsulation right here, right now, how you would like people to remember him from you, and how you.
Well, Randy Rhoads will never die in my heart, and as long as I have a breath of lungs in my body, I will keep his name going. I will, because as much as Ozzy came from Sabbath, Ozzy came from Randy Rhoads as well, and Randy Rhoads came from Ozzy, and it's one of the brief passings that what one gets in one. It's like every now and then you look up in the sky and you see a shooting star, and yet the sky is full of stars. Randy Rhoads is one of those shooting stars.